Why timing matters more than you think in relationships. Have you ever met someone who felt like they were meant for you, but somehow it just didn't work out? The connection was real, the chemistry was undeniable, but something felt off, like you were both in different chapters of the same book. What if I told you it wasn't the love that failed, but the timing? In today's video, we're diving deep into a truth most people overlook in relationships: the power of timing. Not just when you meet someone, but where you are emotionally, mentally, and spiritually when you meet them. Because the right person at the wrong time can still break your heart. If you've ever wondered why something so good still slipped away, or why love sometimes feels more like confusion than clarity, stay with me. This message could change how you view every relationship, past, present, and future. Let's talk about why timing matters more than you think, and why getting it wrong could mean losing the very thing you were hoping to find. We often hear that love is all about finding the right person, but few talk about what it means to be the right person, and more importantly, what it means to be ready for love. Emotional readiness is the invisible foundation of every lasting relationship, and yet it's one of the most overlooked aspects when people jump into romance. You can meet someone who checks every box on your list, someone who is kind, attractive, communicative, honest, but if you are not emotionally ready, even the best relationship can feel like a battlefield. Emotional readiness isn't just about having your life together on paper, it's about having your heart in a place where it can give, receive, and withstand the weight of real intimacy. When you're emotionally unprepared, your wounds will drive your decisions. You may find yourself overthinking every message, interpreting silence as rejection, or expecting another person to fill a void you haven't yet dared to look into. Emotional unreadiness turns small disagreements into wars, healthy space into abandonment, and kindness into suspicion. You can be with someone amazing and still sabotage the relationship simply because you're not emotionally whole. The danger here is that when things fall apart, we often blame the other person or believe the connection just wasn't strong enough, when in reality, it's the unresolved parts of ourselves that got in the way. If you've never taken time to heal from past trauma or understand your own emotional patterns, you carry that baggage into every relationship you enter. That baggage doesn't stay neatly packed either. It spills out in moments of stress, vulnerability, and fear. It clouds your ability to trust, to forgive, to communicate honestly. You start reacting to your partner through the lens of your past rather than responding to who they truly are in the present. And this creates a dynamic that is less about connection and more about survival. It's impossible to build something sustainable when both people are managing emotional landmines that haven't yet diffused. Being emotionally ready means you've done the work to understand your triggers. You know your needs and boundaries and are willing to express them without guilt. You don't rush to attach because you're afraid of being alone, and you don't push love away because you're scared it might hurt. You've reached a place where your worth isn't dependent on someone else's affection, where you're not entering a relationship for rescue, but for reciprocity. That shift changes everything. It allows you to see clearly, choose wisely, and love deeply, because you're no longer acting from a place of fear, but from strength. Timing in relationships isn't just about external circumstances, it's about inner conditions. And if your inner world is still fractured, even the most beautiful love will feel like pressure, not peace. You might mistake intensity for intimacy, or settle for crumbs because you haven't yet realized you deserve the whole meal. But when you're emotionally ready, love stops feeling like a gamble. It becomes a space where growth is possible, mistakes are repairable, and connection is sustainable. And that only happens when you take responsibility for your healing before placing expectations on another human being to carry your emotional weight. Until you do that work, the right person will always feel wrong. Not because they are, but because your heart isn't in a place to recognize or receive them. That's why emotional readiness isn't just a nice to have, it's a must. The health of your future relationship depends on the work you're willing to do right now, before the next connection, before the next potential, before the next heartbreak. Because the truth is, love isn't just about who you're with, it's about who you are when you meet them. When we talk about love and connection, most people focus on chemistry, compatibility, and communication. But there's a deeper, often hidden force that can determine whether a relationship thrives or fades: life alignment. The timing of where you are in your life, your priorities, your goals, your emotional and spiritual journey, matters just as much as how you feel about the person in front of you. You can be madly in love with someone and still find yourself growing apart simply because your lives are moving in opposite directions. Love alone is not enough if the rhythm of your lives— imagine two people deeply in love, but one is chasing career growth that requires late nights, constant travel, and absolute focus, while the other is craving stability, nesting, and building a family. Both desires are valid. Both are deeply human, but they live in tension with each other. Over time, that tension doesn't just cause arguments, it creates a growing emotional gap that love alone can't fill. What started as excitement turns into resentment. One person feels neglected, the other feels pressured, not because either of them is wrong, but because the timing of their life paths isn't aligned. Life alignment isn't about having the same hobbies or liking the same movies. It's about walking in the same direction at a similar pace. It's about wanting the same kind of life, not necessarily identical dreams, but dreams that are compatible. And the hard truth is that many relationships fail not due to lack of love, but because of a mismatch in timing around life priorities. When one person is ready to settle down and the other is still figuring out who they are, the imbalance becomes too heavy to carry. The result isn't always explosive. Sometimes it's quiet, a slow drifting apart, a growing feeling that you're no longer seen, understood, or walking the same road. You may have incredible chemistry with someone who is in a completely different season of life. Maybe they're healing from something they just came out of. Maybe they're still finding themselves or still afraid of committing to a future that feels too distant. Maybe you're ready to build something real while they're still chasing freedom. And that disconnect in timing can create emotional whiplash because your heart is moving forward while theirs is standing still, unsure of what it even wants. It's not that they're wrong for feeling that way, but you can't carry both your hopes and their uncertainty forever. You can't build a future with someone who hasn't decided if they want to be in it. Too often, people stay in misaligned relationships out of hope that the other person will catch up, that maybe with enough time they'll be ready. But while you're waiting for someone to meet you at your level, you're often delaying your own growth. And in that delay, you risk losing yourself, shrinking your own needs, sacrificing your direction, dimming your light, just to make the relationship feel like it's working. But a relationship that requires you to postpone your evolution isn't love, it's a detour. The right person at the wrong time might feel like a near miss, but in reality, it's often divine protection. It's life making room for someone whose pace, purpose, and priorities move with yours, not against you. Because true connection isn't just about how much you love each other. It's about how well your lives align in the timing of that love. Without that alignment, even the strongest bonds begin to unravel under the pressure of unmet expectations and unspoken sacrifices. There's a painful irony in life that many people don't talk about until it's too late. Sometimes you meet the right person at the wrong time. You cross paths with someone who sees you, understands you, challenges you, and feels like home in a world that often feels cold. But instead of things falling into place, everything feels complicated. Circumstances don't line up. One of you isn't ready. Life is pulling you in different directions. And so, despite all the connection and chemistry, you're forced to walk away. That's when you learn one of the hardest truths about relationships. Missed timing can mean missed opportunities. People like to believe that what's meant to be will always find a way, but love doesn't work like fate without effort. You can have all the compatibility in the world, but if one person is still emotionally recovering, still chasing clarity, still figuring out what they want, the relationship becomes a place of imbalance. It becomes a situation where one person is investing, hoping, and building, while the other is hesitating, retreating, and questioning. This disconnect doesn't mean there wasn't something real. In fact, that's what makes it so difficult, because there was, but love, no matter how pure, can't grow if only one person is watering it. Sometimes people come into your life as a lesson, not a forever. They show you what's possible, they remind you of what you deserve, they awaken something in you that had been dormant for years, but that doesn't always mean they're meant to stay. You might meet them at a time when you're ready to commit and they're not, or when they're moving toward healing and you're already whole, and no matter how much you try to bridge that gap, time continues to highlight the distance between who you are and where they are. This isn't about blaming anyone, it's about understanding how crucial timing is in determining whether love can survive. There are moments in life when we're simply not ready to give or receive the kind of love that a relationship requires, not because we don't want to, but because we're still learning how. And that learning curve has consequences. People lose each other in those spaces, promising connections fall apart, the relationship becomes a source of confusion instead of clarity. You start to doubt the experience, question what was real, and wonder what you could have done differently. But more often than not, it wasn't about doing, it was about timing. If you're not in the right emotional or mental space, even the best connection will feel like pressure. It will feel like too much too soon or not enough too late. You'll either retreat to protect yourself or cling too tightly out of fear of losing it. Both responses erode the very trust and ease that relationships need to grow. And eventually someone walks away, either because they need to or because they're forced to. And what's left behind is not just heartbreak, but the haunting feeling that something special slipped through your fingers. Not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't ready. You can't build a future on potential alone. You need presence, you need timing, you need two people who are not only right for each other, but also right with themselves and their place in life. The right person at the wrong time can feel more devastating than a relationship that was never right to begin with, because it shows you what could have been if only things were different. And yet, there's wisdom in that pain. Is growth in accepting that some people are meant to cross your path to prepare you for someone else, someone whose timing doesn't just match your heart, but your life. In relationships, there's often a dangerous misconception that time alone will fix everything, that if you just wait long enough or move fast enough, love will figure itself out. But the truth is, both rushing into a relationship and delaying it too long can be equally damaging. Rushing blinds you to red flags, pushes emotional intimacy before trust has a chance to form, and creates an illusion of closeness that hasn't yet been earned. On the other hand, delaying too much out of fear or overthinking can cause a potential connection to lose momentum, to become uncertain, to slowly fade into doubt. Both extremes are driven by the same thing: a disconnection from emotional clarity and trust in timing. When you rush into something, it's often because you're craving the feeling of being wanted, chosen, or loved. Maybe you're lonely, maybe you've been waiting a long time, or maybe you're just tired of the dating process. So when someone comes along and shows you attention, it's easy to confuse intensity with intimacy. You jump in quickly, you bond deeply before you understand who they really are. You start building a future before you've even built a foundation. And before long, you're invested in something that doesn't feel safe, balanced, or aligned. What started as romantic urgency turns into emotional chaos, and that chaos becomes hard to escape from, because now your heart is in it, even if the relationship isn't healthy. Rushing doesn't allow space for truth to surface. People reveal themselves with time, how they handle conflict, how they show up in stress, what their true values are. If you speed through those early stages, you're committing to a version of someone that may not reflect their full reality. You're not choosing with wisdom, you're choosing with hope, with fantasy, with emotion. And that makes it harder to walk away when reality doesn't match the picture you painted in your head. The red flags you ignored become the reasons you're now hurting. And it all traces back to this desire to fast forward to love, without letting love arrive in its own time. But delaying love can be just as destructive. Some people meet someone amazing, someone they connect with, someone who feels safe, someone who wants to grow with them, but they hold back, they overanalyze, they question every feeling, every word, every moment, not because anything is wrong, but because they're scared of what's right. They're afraid of being vulnerable, of repeating past mistakes, of opening up to something real. So they wait, they distance themselves emotionally, they say they need more time, and in doing so, they slowly let something beautiful wither. Not because it wasn't real, but because they were too afraid to nurture it. Love requires courage, not just emotion. It asks for action and timing, not just attraction. If you hold back too long, the other person eventually gets tired of waiting. They begin to feel uncertain, unwanted, unsure of where they stand. And even if the feelings are mutual, the connection suffers under the weight of hesitation. What once felt promising becomes exhausting, and the opportunity slowly slips away, not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't trusted. The balance between moving too fast and waiting too long is delicate, but necessary. It demands emotional awareness, being honest with yourself about why you're moving the way you are. Are you rushing because you're afraid to be alone? Are you hesitating because you're afraid to be heard? Both responses are natural, but when fear is in control, love doesn't get a fair chance. Healthy love takes time to build, but also requires the courage to act when something real is in front of you. Relationships aren't just about meeting the right person. They're about choosing the right rhythm, because without the right rhythm, even the best song loses its meaning. In any relationship, love is rarely the problem. The deeper issue often lies in growth. More specifically, the pace at which people grow. Every individual is on their own journey of becoming, healing, and discovering who they are. But the truth many people don't want to admit is that growth isn't always synchronized. You can love someone deeply and still outgrow them. You can be committed to the relationship and still find yourself evolving in ways that the other person is not prepared for. This creates an emotional and mental gap that love alone cannot bridge. It's one of the most painful dynamics in a relationship because it's not about fault, it's about evolution. Growth looks different for everyone. One person might be diving deep into self-awareness, unpacking their childhood wounds, developing emotional intelligence, or stepping into a new season of purpose. The other person, meanwhile, may be standing still, unwilling or unready to confront their patterns, to have hard conversations, to take responsibility for their healing. When one person is changing and the other is resisting, the relationship starts to feel imbalanced. Conversations become strained, the emotional connection begins to dim, and what was once easy and natural starts to feel heavy and uncertain. It's not because love disappeared, it's because growth did not match. It's a lonely feeling to be growing while the person next to you remains the same. At first, you try to bridge the gap with patience. You try to encourage them, to lead by example, to hope they'll catch up. But over time, that patience turns into frustration. You begin to realize that you're constantly pouring into someone who isn't pouring into themselves. You start to carry the emotional weight of two people, yours and theirs. And no matter how much love exists between you, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. Relationships require two people who are willing to meet each other in the middle, not just emotionally, but also in their commitment to growth. When people grow at different speeds, it doesn't always show up in dramatic arguments. Sometimes it shows up in subtle ways. A shift in energy, a lack of depth in conversation, a disinterest in shared dreams. You find yourself craving more emotional depth, more purpose, more honesty, while the other person seems content with where things are. And that's when the hardest decisions surface. Because staying means shrinking. It means silencing parts of yourself just to maintain the peace. It means delaying your evolution to preserve a connection that can't hold the new version of you. But walking away doesn't mean the relationship was a failure. It simply means you honored your path. You chose to keep growing even when it meant letting go of someone you love. And sometimes That's the most courageous form of love there is. Loving yourself enough to not wait in a place where your soul is no longer expanding. Growth isn't always beautiful. Sometimes it breaks things that once felt unbreakable, but the cost of staying in a relationship where your growth is resented or ignored is far greater than the pain of letting go. No one grows at the exact same pace, and perfect alignment isn't the goal. But what matters is that both people are committed to growth, whatever that looks like, that there is a mutual desire to become better, to face the uncomfortable, to evolve together. Because without that shared commitment, one person becomes the student while the other remains stagnant. And eventually, love turns into a classroom, not a partnership. The only way for love to remain alive is for both people to keep choosing growth, not just individually, but side by side, in rhythm, in respect, and in readiness. In relationships, timing is not just a detail. It is often the difference between love that thrives and love that fades. You can have connection, chemistry, even commitment, but without emotional readiness, shared direction, aligned growth, and a healthy rhythm, even the most promising relationship can unravel. Love isn't just about finding someone who feels right. It's about meeting them when you are ready to love with maturity, when they are walking in the same direction, and when both of you are willing to grow, not just together, but at a pace that honors the journey of each individual. Missed timing can lead to missed opportunities, and no amount of passion can replace the need for alignment. That's why it's not only about who you love, but when you love them, and whether the season you're in allows that love to truly flourish. Thank you for listening with an open heart. I hope this message gave you clarity, strength, and the courage to trust that the right relationship isn't just about the right person, it's about the right time. Keep growing, keep healing, and most of all, keep honoring your journey.